Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Monitor Hybrid and Cloud-Based SQL Server Estates. My name is Louise Domerson and I'm the Virtual Events Coordinator here at Redgate Software in Cambridge, UK. Our pre-sales engineer, David Yu from our Pasadena office, is going to be running today's webinar. David will run through the bulk of the session and then I will rejoin at the end to post any questions that you have through to David. So that's enough from me. Over to you, David.
All right. Thank you, Louise. Just as my colleague mentioned, my name is David. I'm one of the pre-sales engineer here at Redgate. I've been with the company for almost 7 years now, holding various roles. The last couple of years, I've been in the pre-sales role, mainly focusing on SQL Monitor and working with DBAs to monitor their SQL Server estates. So the topic of today's webinar, is how to monitor hybrid and cloud-based SQL Server estates. So one of the trends that we've seen with with our clients and with the DBAs that we work with is that more and more teams and companies are not just on-prem anymore, but rather they have still a good amount of servers on-premise, but we also see quite a bit of usage, whether it's on VM. And the new trend that we're seeing is that a lot of companies are now adopting Azure-based servers, especially with with Redgate and with SQL Monitor, we definitely want to keep up with the trend and making our solution as useful and as relevant as possible to our customers. And so so what we'll talk about today is just how we monitor hybrid estates, and also the various metrics that we collect for those various platforms. So to get into it, we'll go into our interface here. So I'm sure some of you have seen this before. This is the Global Overviews page. This is the first thing that you'll see when you access the tool's user interface. And if you notice, within our environment that we're monitoring, we do have quite a few, that's on-prem, but we also have a couple that is monitoring Azure databases. So if you take a look at the left-hand side here, one of the capabilities of our tool is allowing you to label or put certain instances into folders. And so you can see here that we have our production machines, and we have a couple that's tagged as Azure databases. So these are actually monitoring AzureDB. And so let me get into one of these instances and show you the difference between how we collect AzureDB metrics and just regular metrics. So I'll show I'll view both, but just want to kind of focus on AzureDB first. So the layout of the instance overview page is quite similar to any on-prem ones. And we also collect the CPU, memory, disk I/O, and weights. But you'll notice that at the very bottom here, actually, let me get out of this one. I'm going to go into another one here. There we go. So as you can see, like the CPU, it's it's on the database level. The memory is for SQL Server. Then we have the log I/O and data I/O stats, along with the general weight stats, where we break it down to resource and signal. And then most importantly, we're able to kind of see the top queries that are running on that particular database. So this is, one of the main benefits of using, a dedicated monitoring tool to monitor your Azure databases, because we can capture metrics, such as the top queries and also the top weights that are occurring on that particular database. So let us go back to the overviews page here. I'm going to run you guys through um, an on-prem instance, and you'll notice that the interface for the most part is the same. The only difference is that with the on-prem version, you're able to, or rather, our tool is able to capture both the machine metrics and the SQL Server metrics. So at the very top here, you'll see the performance graph, where we're tracking CPU, memory, disk I/O, and weights. And at the very bottom here, you'll also see these icons. That is representative of the alerts that gets triggered on, or rather within that timeline. So if I were to hover over any of these icons here, you'll see the type of alerts that got triggered at that point. And another key feature within this graph here is that we have a slider window that you can move around, and you can either expand or contract as needed. And whatever time range that the slider window is highlighting, all the data below will render to match that highlighted period. So as of right now, as you can see, I'm hovering around 2200 hours to 2 a.m. And so all the data below, so all the metrics, all of the diagnostic data, they're all reflecting that time range there. So this is quite critical to understand, because this gives you the capability to, drill down into a specific point in time without, getting the aggregate data from any other time periods. And so below that section there, we do have again, the diagnostic data. As we saw in the previous page for the Azure database platform, we capture the top queries and the top weights, and it goes the same for any on-prem or in VM. And one thing to note here is that with this particular instance that I'm on, this is actually a VM instance. And so that's something to keep in mind. So again, with our tool, you're able to monitor, any on-prem servers, VMs, and Azure-based platforms. So both infrastructure as a service, so the Azure VM, and then also AzureDB, which is the platform as a service option. Okay, so kind of going back to the diagnostic data here. This is the metrics that we capture to show the top queries and the top weights that are running on your particular instance. And by default, we're only showing the top 10 queries, but you can change that list to either top 25 or top 50. So it's not just confined to the top 10 any longer. And you'll notice that you can also sort by these column headers here. So sorting by execution count, by duration, by CPU time, and so forth. And you can click into any one of these queries, and that will open up the query details window. So within this window here, first we're able to show you the full statement of that query. We can also show you the weights that are associated with that query, along with the login name and the program name for each of those weight types. And then also at the very bottom, you can see the query trend. So here you're able to visualize how that had been performing over a specific period of time. And so the way that we have it set up now is showing the query history by duration, but you can see it by CPU time, by logical reads, and so forth. And so no longer are you only able to capture just the aggregate data or the average, but rather you can kind of see where the query have spiked or where it may have performed in a way that's that deviates from like what's normal. And then at the very top here, you do have the blue button where you can see the query plan. So this is an estimated query plan, and it's just based on the query analyzer, but we do put it within our own interface. And the way that we break it down within this interface here is that we do break down the query into its distinct statements. And if any of these statements have either expensive operations or data heavy operations, they'll show up within the next column over. And you can navigate to each of these segments. And within this section here, you're able to see more granular information, such as the properties, the defined values, the output, predicate, seek predicate, and so forth. And then lastly, we do have this section here for warnings. So this is based on the query processor. And this is quite useful because it does provide hints to improve query costs. So for example, what the warning is telling us here is that if we were to implement the following index, it can improve query costs by 83.87%. So again, quite useful to help you fine tune the queries that are running, and then also just improving performance and improving query costs on that particular instance. Okay, cool. So so that's the top queries table. So let's move on to top weights. Right, so these are the weight types that could potentially cause bottlenecks or performance issues on your particular instance. And just like the previous table, you can sort by these column headers here. And you can click into any one of these weight types. And it'll open up this window where first we'll give you a description of what that weight type is. We'll also provide some static suggestions on how to investigate that issue and static suggestions on how to fix that particular issue. And then right below that section, we will show you a list of affected queries. So this is quite useful. It's giving you just another perspective of the weights that are occurring on your machine, and also the queries that are associated with those weight types. Cool. Okay, so kind of moving on within this page here. So we took a look at the top queries and the top weights. So below that, we will provide some info for just general SQL Server metrics, such as SQL compilation, page splits, batch requests, and so forth. Below that, we'll provide some host machine metrics. So these are metrics being collected from the OS. And here you can see the network utilization, CPU, memory on the host machine, and then also all of your existing disk drives on that particular instance. And here you can see the space used and also the average read and write time for each of those drives. Below that, we can show you the blocking processes that are occurring on your instance. And one thing to keep in mind with blocking processes, so the way that we track blocking processes is that we're only tracking the lead blocker or the head blocker, meaning any blocks that have descendant blocks. And so, and the reason why we do this is because, if we were to capture every single block, as I'm sure a lot of you will know, you might have thousands of of alerts or thousands of notifications, of that particular occurrence. And so, because of that, we're only tracking lead blockers. that have descendant blocks. So for example, within the section here, there's a graphic that we provide to kind of show you how everything or what the blocking process is. So here, as you can see, within the red box, this is the head blocker. So we can tell you the host name, the application, the login name, and the total blocking time. And then everything below it that's not highlighted in red, these are all of its descendant blocks. And so, instead of just, reading plain text, you're able to kind of see everything, in a graphical form that for the most part, make it a lot easier for, for users to read. Okay, so below that, we do have the section for SQL user processes. If you're using availability groups, we do have a dedicated dashboard for AG. And this section here just shows you all of your AG clusters that exist. So these are all of ours. Below that, we have the top system processes that are running on the particular host machine. And then the error log, the report from SQL Server itself. And then at the very bottom, we do show you all of your existing databases that exist within your instance. And from here, we could drill down one level deeper into the database level, where we'll show you a set of database specific metrics, such as log flushes, transactions, the properties of that database. And then at the very bottom, you'll see that we also show you the top queries that are running on that particular database. So you'll notice that the format of this table is identical to what we saw earlier. The only difference is that the previous table was the top queries running on the instance level, whereas this table here is showing you the top queries that's running on this specific database, which is our community server database. Okay, so that's a quick run through of the instance overview. So again, this page here, will provide you with that specific set of metrics for that particular instance. And whether you're monitoring a SQL Server instance that's sitting on a VM like this one is, whether you're monitoring one that is sitting on on-prem, or whether it's in AzureDB, we'll provide you with the data that's needed to give you a good idea of what's going on, and also giving you the capability to see and plan accordingly with any occurrences or any events that may have adverse effects on your SQL Server estate. Okay, so I'm just kind of moving on here into the next section. So we can go into the alert section. So within this tab here, the best way to think of it is that it's simply an inbox for all of your alerts that got triggered within your SQL Server estate. And you'll notice that on the left-hand column here, this is the specific hierarchy of our alerting system. So you'll notice that the quote unquote parent level is the all servers level, and then it breaks it down to any folder groups that you have created, and then all of the servers or instances that exist within each of those folders. You'll also notice that next to each of the names, there's a number in parentheses. And those numbers are just simply indicating the number of alerts that we have on each of those tiers. So as you can see on the all servers level, which is the global level, we have over 52,000 alerts. So I think our DBs are not doing their job right now, because we have quite a few alerts that exist. And so one thing that you can do within this section here is that instead of sifting through 52,000 alerts, if you're interested in just seeing the alerts that got triggered on a particular folder, or ones that got triggered on a particular instance, you're able to just click on that particular tier, and only that set of alerts will show up within the body of the page. So for example, if I just want to see the alerts got triggered on our SM DC2 box, I can just simply click on that tier, and then only that set of alerts will show up within the body. So here we can see that only the monitoring error and the machine reachable alerts got triggered on this particular machine. And then another feature to point out within this page here is the ability to filter your alerts. So again, as you can see within our environment, we have quite a few alerts, right? So it might be a bit daunting to kind of go through everything. Um, there are ways to clear it out, as needed. That's something that a lot of our clients will have different strategies to go about it. But in the case where you have X amount of existing alerts, you might have certain scenarios or certain use cases where you only want to see a specific set of alerts, right? So that's why we have this capability here to do advanced filters. So as you can see within this section here, you can either filter by alert types, or you can filter by time. And filtering by time, can be useful in those cases where, for example, um, one of your colleagues complained that that yesterday between 3 and 5 p.m. Your system was running very slow. Obviously, if you're if this is the first time that you've heard of it, you will need to start somewhere, right, to kind of dig down and find what the root cause is. And so, one clever way to kind of go about it, or one of the many methods that you can employ is, kind of going into your alert inbox and then filtering it by time, right? So filtering it by yesterday, so October 10th, between 3 and 5 p.m. And so only that set of alerts will show up. And seeing all the alerts got triggered within that time range will give you kind of a good idea of what was going on, the issues that might have been occurring, and seeing the activity of what was going on just by looking at the alerts. And so that's something that's that can be quite useful, just to give you another layer of evidence and another layer of information as to what was going on within that specific time range. Okay, so let's move on to the analysis tab. So this is one of the key features of SQL Monitor, where you're able to take a closer look at at the metrics behavior, and also being able to put together reports, or rather putting together graphs where you're able to kind of see how things were performing at certain periods of time. And so, given that, with what we want to show here, are the capabilities of monitoring both, or rather monitoring everything from on-prem to VMs and also to Azure-based platforms. This is one of the areas where you're able to kind of see that, in action. So if you notice within our list here, we do organize our metrics by metric types. So the first section here are machine metrics, which are just simply host machine metrics. Here we have SQL Server metrics, and then we have database metrics. And then, as you can see here, we're also able to capture the specific Azure SQL database metrics. So, as you can see within that list there, we're able to capture the AzureDB CPU time, the DTU utilization, the I/O utilization, and then also the log writes and the memory utilization. And then we have a section for AG groups, and then at the very bottom here, we're also able to capture VMware specific metrics. So, prior to having this feature within SQL Monitor, we were only able to treat VMs as if it was a host machine, and so our tool didn't have the capability to distinguish what was on-prem and what was on a VM. But as we saw previously, and as we are looking at this list now, we're now able to not only distinguish that a certain machine is a VM machine, but we're also able to capture the host machine for that VM. So here, as you can see, we could track guest CPU ready time, guest CPU swap waits, CPU co-stop, memory swaps, guest memory, and so forth. So these are all very specific metrics to VMs. And so what you can do within this page here is that you're able to specify the metric that you want to look at, and then you can specify the instance that you want to see. Let me take a look at one of these. There you go. So here we're looking at the guest CPU ready time. So let me just shorten the time period here. 15 minutes. So the value is fairly low on this particular one. So but the point is here that we're able to kind of show you, or rather, we give our users the ability to specify their metrics, specify the server that they want to take a look at, and then from there being able to visualize how things are performing over a specific period of time. So let us take a look at some of the Azure databases here. So go to Azure VM. This one should have some stuff in here. There you go. So not only are you able to put just one metric into a graph, but one of the capabilities of this page here is that you can layer on multiple metrics into the graph. So for example, right now we're looking at the DTU utilization for our SQL Monitor database. And so say I want to see this plus the SQL Server Central instance. So what I can do is that I can layer on another metric. So I can just simply click on add another metric, specify the metric that I want to track. And there you go. So you're able to layer on different metrics onto the same graph, or even the same metric but on different platforms into the same graph. So this is quite useful because now you're able to see correlations between two different sets of data that the tool is collecting, and you're able to visualize everything within one graph. The other main thing that you can do here is that you're able to compare baseline, right? So, as a DBA or as any professional that's looking after your SQL Server estate, one question, or rather, one kind of like idea that you would need to have is, what's normal and what's not normal within your environment, right? So, one way to kind of determine that, and also to tease out anomalies that may have occurred within your system, is to utilize the compare baseline feature. So here we're looking at the machine processor time for our Azure VM, and this is how everything was performing. Let's do actually 1 hour is fine. So here, we're looking at its performance between 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. And this is how it's been performing. But for the most part, we see this large spike here, but everything else looks pretty consistent. But we don't know what's normal, right? So one thing that we can do here is that we can say compare baseline, say compare it against 24 hours earlier. And so here we're looking at two sets of data, right? So the darker blue line represents a set of data from today, and the lighter blue line represents a set of data from the previous day on Wednesday. And so now we can see that the trend looks pretty consistent, right? Where the spike, although the spike from today is significantly larger than the one from yesterday, we can see that it's occurring at approximately the same time, and everything else seems to be more or less on the same trend as the previous day. However, looking at two sets of data may not be enough to determine a baseline. So the next thing we can do here, extend baseline, say to 10 days. Right, so now what we're looking at is the same metric, right? So the machine processor time for our Azure VM platform for the same time range. So this is roughly looking at 8:30 to 9:30 a.m., but just at a 24-hour interval for the past 10 days. And just by visualizing this many sets of data, we can more confidently say, what's normal, what's not normal. So here we can say that, for the most part, it's utilizing, roughly, under 5% or around 5%. But there are peaks, that have occurred, where we're able to kind of see, what's normal and what's not normal. And it looks like the spike here that it occurred this morning at 8:42 a.m. It seemed to be a bit of an anomaly because, as you can see, there are no other occurrences that reach that peak. And it's definitely, an anomaly from how things have been performing from the past 10 days. And so, again, utilizing this feature can allow you to, understand your baseline, understand what's normal, and as we can see here, we can also point out or be able to tease out, any anomalies that may have occurred on that particular instance. So again, to recap this page here, you're able to specify the metrics, and with the metrics, not only is it primarily for on-prem servers, but we have specific metrics for AzureDB, and we have very specific metrics for even the VMware platform, and being able to capture the host machine metrics for VMs. Okay, cool. So kind of going in order here into the next tab. So we have the reports tab. So with the reports tab, you could think of our reports as containers, and within those containers, you're able to add tiles, right? And the tiles are essentially these graphs that you see here within this page. And so, for example, within our environment, I think we have a couple of pre-made ones. So this is one that we've made within our environment called the Server Summary Report. And so, you can add all of your relevant tiles into a given report. So to do that, all you need to do is just click on the blue button here called Add Tile. And essentially, there are two tile types that you can add. So the first tile type is the analysis graph tile. So you'll notice that the format here is identical to what we saw in the previous tab, in the analysis tab. So it's just simply specifying your metric, and then also specifying the servers that you want to take a look at. And so, this way you're able to, put together specific metrics and specific tiles that you might want to add into your report. And once you've added all of your necessary tiles, at that point you can simply share the report, right? So the simplest way to share reports is literally just copying the URL, sending the URL to a colleague, and assuming that the colleague have access to SQL Monitor, once they log on, they're able to see what you're seeing on their end. In the case where they don't have access, or if you want a more static option, you can save the report as a PDF file, and then sending off the PDF file to the recipient. And then lastly, you also have the ability to send the report on a scheduled basis. So for example, if say your director needs a certain report on Monday at 7 a.m., you're able to specify the date and time, the frequency of it, and then add the recipient as needed. And then from there, instead of you having to send the report manually, you can send it on a scheduled basis to your recipients. Cool. And so the next section here that we want to talk about is the estate tab. So this is quite new with what our dev teams have been working on, and a lot of the capabilities here is quite useful for DBAs to kind of keep track and to keep inventory of your estate. So within the estate tab, there are a handful of sub-tabs under it. So the first one here is called the installed version. So this is literally just keeping an inventory of all of your existing servers that you're monitoring. And not only that, you're also able to see the version that each of those SQL Server instances are on, and also whether you're up to date or whether there's an upgrade path for each of those versions that you're currently on. And then this column here even provides the link for you to download the latest patch to get your SQL Server instance up to date. And so this is quite useful for a lot of DBAs, because you're able to keep track of of what exists within your environment, without having to type this into like a Excel spreadsheet and kind of doing it in that archaic way. You're able to kind of see everything within this view here. And then we also have this disk usage sub-tab. So this is so this tab here, is for capacity planning for your disk space, right? So the top graph here, what it's showing is that with the blue line, it's showing what you're currently using, and what what percentage that you're taking up within your max capacity of your disk. And then the orange line is showing you the trend of how much it's been growing by, for the past 6-7 months or so. And then the gray line in the middle here shows the current date. So at this time, we're using roughly 1,000 gigs, or 1 terabyte, I suppose. And then beyond that is the projected usage of your disk space. And finally, a year from now in October 2019, as you can see, we're slated to use 1.27 terabytes. And so again, instead of doing your own calculations, we're able to to show you the trend of what's been used, and showing you the projected state of how much you might use a year from now, or even 6 months from now, and so forth. So again, quite useful for DBAs to do capacity planning and making sure they have enough resources to support their infrastructure. And then below that, as you can see here, we do break down, your disk usage, on specific servers, and the drives on the servers. Here, we can show you the space used, the capacity for each of those servers, the percentage used, and then the projected use for each of those servers. Cool. Okay, so the next sub tab here is the backups tab. So again, this is quite new. I believe we just released this within the last few weeks. It's currently still in beta, but once you've downloaded the latest version, you're able to kind of see this within your install also. And so again, this is just an inventory list of all of your backup jobs. It'll show you the when you've taken your full, your diff, your logs, the recovery type for each of those backup jobs. And again, instead of doing it manually or having you know a very archaic process of keeping track of your jobs, you're able to come to this page here to take a look and see everything within one interface. All the jobs that have occurred and the ones that are being scheduled. And then lastly, we have the SQL Server, or rather the SQL agent jobs that is running on your, or rather within your environment. So at the very top here, we give you a summary of the number of total jobs, the number of total executions, and then also keeping track of what has succeeded and what has failed. And below, this is showing you the specific jobs that are occurring. So as you can see here, we don't have anything that's failed up to this point, but we do have everything that has ran successfully. So between these two lists of successful and failed jobs, so all of your jobs will fall into one of these categories. And so with our logic with how we order this page here is that with for DBAs it's probably most important to be notified of the failed jobs first, which is why this is ordered at the top. And so you see, any jobs that have failed, and then also just making sure that all of the successful jobs show up within this portion here. Cool. So, again, with this tab, with the states tab in general, it is a fairly new feature that we've added to the tool. The installed version and the disk usage were the first two that we've added. Again, it just came out of beta fairly recently, and then the backups and the agent jobs tab, is fairly new. It was released within the past couple of weeks, and so our dev team will continue to work on it to make it more robust, to make it more reliable in terms of its performance. And as users of our tool, you can definitely check it out to see how it feels and see how it works within your own environment. And also on that note, you'll also notice within the top right-hand corner here, there's a what's new section. And so this is giving you a timeline and also news of what we've been working on. So as you can see here, you can take a look at the new features that we've just added. So as I mentioned, the SQL agent jobs and the backup sub-tabs here are fairly new into what we've added into SQL Monitor. And so you can kind of go through all of the work that our dev team have done for SQL Monitor. And then you can see the release timeline also. And on a side note, with SQL Monitor, this is one of the main solutions that we have one of the largest dev teams working on. And so we're continually adding, new features, improving, current features, and just making it more stable by, by doing bug fixes, and most importantly, listening to our customers and listening to our clients, with what has worked, what hasn't worked, and so, definitely, you can, voice your opinion, to Redgate, and we'll definitely, take it to heart. Cool. So the very last thing that I just want to kind of walk you guys through here is the configurations page. So this is what you can label as an admin page where you're able to um, organize your monitored servers, organize users or add users that needs access to the tool. You're also able to set data purging, so that way, you can control how much data you're holding, and in certain cases, you might want to extend the set of data that our tool is collecting. Another key feature of our tool is custom metrics, right? So with custom metrics, you're able to add, or rather, you're able to collect metrics that we may have not added as a default metric for us to track. And so we do have this website here called SQL Monitor Metrics. So this is another community website that Redgate hosts, where we're able to have our users and then also our developers share the custom metrics that they have written. And so, you can come to this page here, you can browse our custom metrics. And so, for example, if you're looking for custom metrics for storage, for example, you're able to kind of see what exists within that section there. And then you click into any one of these pages. First we'll give you a description of what that custom metric is and what it does. And most importantly, we'll provide you with the T-SQL query that's needed to create the custom metric. And so you can browse our library and add custom metrics into the tool that you want to track within your own environment, or you can write your own custom metrics. The main guideline for creating your own custom metric is that as long as you can write a T-SQL query that will return a single point numerical value, you can add that as a custom metric. And once you've added a custom metric, you can also create a custom alerts to go along with the custom metric. So that way you can define the threshold at which point you want to receive an alert for. So that's something that's also within the capability of this function. And finally, once you've added your custom metric and once it's been collecting data successfully, you can go back into this section here, into the analysis tab. And again, it's ordered by metric types. And once you've added custom metrics, it'll show up within this section here. So we should see custom metrics within this list. There you go. Okay. So I know we have about 10 minutes left. So, I just want to close out with, again, just kind of emphasizing, the fact that, as a company and as a team that's been working with DBAs for the past 20 years, and even for SQL Monitor, being on the market for the past 8 years or so, we're definitely keen and aware of like the trends that are happening within within our niche, right? And again, what we're seeing is that for a lot of our clients, it's not just on-prem monitoring anymore. It's not just on-prem servers that they have within their estate, but rather they have a hybrid environment where they have a chunk that's on-prem, a chunk that's sitting on VMs, and a growing trend where we're seeing users migrating to Azure-based platforms, whether it's Azure VM or Azure databases. And thus, with these trends that we're seeing, we want to make our tool as useful and as relevant as possible, to our user base, right? And so that's why our dev team have been working quite hard, to add the capability of not just being able to monitor your your on-prem environment, but also being able to monitor Azure DB and VMs. And as you saw throughout this whole demo, we do have those very specific metrics that you can track for Azure databases or VMs, along with your traditional on-prem servers. And I think with doing that, our solution is quite relevant to a large swath of the SQL Server community that's out there, because again, for a lot of companies, it's not just on-prem anymore, but it's going to the cloud and it's going into VMs. Okay, so with that being said, and we have a few minutes here, so I think at this time, what we can transition into is going into questions. And so, Louise, if there's anything that the audience have submitted, we can take a look at those now.
Brilliant, thanks, David. So yeah, we've had a few questions come in. So the first one is, will this tool also monitor Azure managed instances?
Yes, so with our tool, and in light of the various Azure platforms, we can for sure manage Azure VMs, and then the Azure Platform as a Service. So with Azure Platform as a Service, there's the options for just the databases. There's also the Elastic Pool option. So with Elastic Pools, that's something that's coming up fairly soon. Actually, I had a meeting with our product manager yesterday, and he showed me kind of like the preview for Elastic Pools, and so that's something that's coming in the pipeline. And so we will have a more comprehensive capability of monitoring Azure platforms. So it's not just going to be VMs and Azure databases, but it'll be a lot of those sub categories also.
Brilliant. And next one is, how does licensing for Azure DB servers work?
Very good question. So as it stands, the way that we will license Azure DBs is that for every one SQL Server monitor license, that one license would be good for 5 Azure DBs. And so hypothetically, if you're only looking to monitor, say, 3 Azure database platform as a service option, if you were to buy a one server license of SQL Monitor, that would be enough to cover those 3 Azure databases.
Brilliant. And another one is, do the query plan reports also report data from the query store?
So with the query plan, so it's just the estimated query plan, and so it's yeah, so it's not going to capture any actual query plans, and to my knowledge, it's not going to capture the query store. So it's just the estimated query plan that exists within your instance.
Excellent, thank you. And am I able to migrate on-prem licenses to cloud licenses if my setup changes in the future?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. We're definitely fairly flexible with with migrating licenses. So as long as the amount of licenses that you currently have correlates to covering a new set of servers. If for example, you were on-prem, and then now you're looking to use those licenses to monitor cloud-based servers, that should totally be fine. It's just a matter of switching it up, within the licensing interface. And if there's any issues, you can give us a call. Our licensing team will, help sort out any issues that might come up.
That's great. Thanks, David. We have got time for a couple more questions. So if there are, I've got a few still here, but if there's any more that you have for David, then do feel free to type those in the question box, and we'll hopefully get time to get to those. But in the meantime, David, someone has asked, obviously this has been really useful for an overview of Monitor and how it works. But the question is, do you have any more online tutorials to help them either get started or sort of develop their use with SQL Monitor?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think if you're if you're new to the tool, I would suggest going to our website. So let me open that real quick. So if you go to our Redgate website, and then you go to products, and then go to SQL Monitor. There it is. Just missed it. So this page here will give you, a very good overview, of how the tool works, and the various features, that comes with the solution. So this is a good place to start. There is a resources section also, where we do have, some videos, on SQL Monitor, also articles, case studies, ebooks that you can kind of sort through. So I think all of these would be quite helpful in terms of giving you a better idea of how the tool works. I think for more advanced searches, or for more technical searches on SQL Monitor, I would suggest going to our documentation site and going to the SQL Monitor section. And so on the left-hand column here, you have all of the topics organized. So for example, if I want to see, topics on alerts, I can just go into there, and then essentially anything that is related to alerts, you can find within this documentations page here.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. So we haven't had any other questions come in. So I think that's probably it for today. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks David for taking us through that great webinar. It was really useful. I certainly learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. So thanks very much everyone. Have a lovely evening for those in the UK and EMEA, and have a lovely rest of the day to everyone sort of rest of the world. And we hope to see you at another Redgate webinar very soon. Thanks everyone.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you. Take care. Bye.